Hello, welcome to the Ghosts of Harrenhal. My name's Simon.
And I'm Mackelly.
Thank you for joining us for episode 212 of our chapter-by-chapter book review of A Song of Ice and Fire by George Martin. Today, we'll be discussing chapter 68 of A Storm of Swords. That's Sansa 6.
And as we always...
Lots of alliteration in that sentence.
Yes, it is.
Storm of Swords, Sansa 668.
It's almost a tongue twister there. So we're going to chat about the chapter, and we're going to try not to spoil any future plot points for you. Hopefully, we're going to provide you some entertainment along the way.
We'll summarise what happened, discuss our thoughts on it, provide some useful background, compare it to the television show, indulge a little pedantry, and cover some relevant news and list of correspondence. Be sure to check out the show notes. They'll provide some additional information about the geography and characters of this chapter. How are you, Mackelly? How have you been? It's been too long.
It has been too long. It has. It's great to see your smiling face yet once again. I will say, smiling. I'm glad to have that intro in the normal order. Last week, it was Jenny and me, and I had to do your bits, and Jenny did my bits, and I was just not practiced at doing your bits.
Yeah, it's like trying to swim feet first. Yeah, it's just not right. Yeah.
and you usually like I don't know, what do? You keep the things moving, right?
Oh God, yeah. We'd be here all night if you were in charge.
So I had to be I didn't have to. Jenny probably would have done a better job than I did anyway. But I was the one saying, okay, let's move into this section and this section, and it just didn't. It doesn't flow as smoothly as when you're guiding us along.
Yeah, but you know what? That's not Jenny's fault. It's just practice.
No, definitely not Jenny's fault. That was all me and my lack of practice steering the ship. I guess that's how I'd describe it.
Just can I express my gratitude to Jenny for taking over from me so that I could go to my sister's wedding and have a great time without any guilt or worries about how beautifully handled Ghosts of Harrenhal would be, and it was.
And she did a fantastic job. Did you listen?
I did. Of course I did.
Of course. Did you, at the part where Jenny said, Simon's shaking his head right now about us two saps. Were you shaking your head about us two saps?
Well, I mean, a little. Let's be honest.
Yeah, we figured. Well, yes, I had a great time with Jenny last week. She and I thought we had really good chemistry, I felt like.
Chemistry? Uh-huh,
Yeah. I've never heard
Maybe
of that
it's just
before.
you. Maybe you just have good chemistry. It doesn't really matter what the other side of the equation is. It's always chemistry.
I felt like you had good chemistry with her as well, so
yeah,
I don't know.
Definitely.
But anyway, now I just want to sit back and enjoy the ride from here on out.
So I went to the UK, and I went to my sister's wedding, and I went to my foster sister's surprise birthday party. I had a great time. The whole time I had a great time. The weather cooperated. It was great to see my family. There were no squabbles or arguments.
Wow.
Couldn't have asked for better. I even met the soccer player who used to live with my mum. You remember that?
Yes, the one who put his boots in the washer, right? Is that what it was?
Yeah, no, well, remember he had invisible boots? That's what my mum called them.
Why did she call them that?
I don't know why she called them invisible boots. I suspected that he was pretending he had a pair of boots in his hand, and she fell for this trick. But you don't remember that?
I don't. I just remember him making a mess with the washer. Is that what it was?
Yeah, I mean, God,
something like that.
My mum is particular. I rediscovered this on my week at her house.
I'm sure you did.
You can cross her very easily if you don't do things her way.
I can't relate. At all.
I've come back with so many stories. We're going to have to parcel them out over the coming weeks because there were just so many. And some of them, fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, some of them are simply too salacious to record. I just can't do it because these people are my family, and if they hear it, I'll be disowned. However, our sustainer calls are not recorded, and I'm willing to spill the beans completely. So the next sustainer call, that's where the truly juicy stuff will be.
Get ready, sustainers.
But I do have a couple of... Actually, I have one story from before I went. Just before we went, Carson and I went to a restaurant, just the two of us.
Okay.
And as we walked into the restaurant, there was outdoor seating, and it was a pleasant evening. And I said, "Oh, do you want to sit outside?" And Carson was like, she was a little non-committal. She was like, the music's a little bit loud. She said, "I'm not sure." So we went into the restaurant, and in America, they have a hostess who shows you to your seat. And she saw us, and she said, "Table for two." And she turned as if to take us into the restaurant. So I turned to Carson with a sort of inquisitive eyebrow, whether or not she'd made a decision on whether or not to sit outside.
Yes. Now,
when you've been married as long as we have, you don't have to have much sort of vocal, you can do things. So when I looked at her, I could see without, she wasn't pulling like a sort of like a grimace or anything. Just like the sort of like slant of her mouth, I could tell she just didn't care. Right. And she was fine with me making this decision. But I don't want to make any decisions ever. So I stared at her for a few more seconds, and she was just not giving. So eventually I turned back to the hostess and I said, "Yes." And then it dawned on me that hostess probably thought it took me 5 seconds to count to 2. Like,
is there 2 of you? 1, 2, 3.
Apparently it's just the 2 of us.
Yeah. I thought there were more with us, but I don't know where they went.
Quick head count here. You got it, lady. 2 of us. It cracked me up to think that she must have... I don't know what she thought I was doing, because really I just turned, looked at my wife, turned back and went, "Yes," but it took an age. Like, if we said, "Hey, do you want to sit outside?" she would have understood.
Right.
But we didn't. It was complete silence, and it cracked me up. The other story I'm going to tell tonight is actually sort of like, it harks back to a story of a couple of weeks ago when my mother and sister refused to answer the question about how long the hedge was.
Oh, it was as long as it was.
Exactly. I've now seen the hedge. I can confirm it is the length of the new bungalows.
Okay. So they were right with their estimation.
Bang on. But we were sitting down for dinner, and I was there, Carson was there, my brother was there, and his wife, Sophie, who... I've met Sophie before a couple of times, but I really love Sophie. She's French, and she's funny, and she's just French. And French people can be very
French,
blunt.
Huh?
One of the really good stories that's back for the Sustainer call is what she said about one of the guests at the wedding, which is awesome.
Okay.
But we were sitting at dinner with the 4 of us and my mother, and Sophie noticed a picture on the wall, and it was a print of a painting by L.S. Lowry, who you probably haven't heard of, but he's the most famous artist from Manchester. He painted scenes of Manchester, and I wasn't... When did he do it? Well, that's the sort of subject of the story, because I wasn't 100% sure when he did it. The scenes suggest early 20th century, but maybe not. Manchester didn't change that much between the sort of 1780s and 2000s, so it could have kind of been any time, really. So I said to my mum, so Sophie asked about the painting. We sort of said it was Lowry, and, we gave her the same information I just gave you. And because I didn't know when he did it, I asked my mum, I said, "Oh, when was Lowry alive?" And my mum said, "Salford." He was definitely born in Salford. I was like, what?
Interesting fact, but not helpful at all.
No, I'm asking. So I asked again. I said, "No, when, Mum? When?" And my brother chimed in with South Manchester. So there was much hilarity about this.
Yes, much hilarity.
So he was actually born 1887, so he was quite a bit older than my mum, but his active period was sort of just before my mum was born. So,
okay, well, there you go. Did you have to Google that?
Correct. My mum did not know the answer to that. She knew he was born in Salford. Funnily enough, actually, the wedding was right next door to where he was born. So he kept cropping up over the course of the week.
If that question hadn't even come up, you would have learned that he was born in Salford or whatever.
That's very true. He's extremely famous in the UK, but he famously painted people as sort of matchsticks. That's how he painted them.
Oh, yeah.
But mostly his paintings were of sort of like industrial scenes with the people sort of walking between the factories kind of thing.
Yes. He didn't want them to be the focal point, I guess.
All right. Let's get down to business. How did we leave Sansa Stark? Last we saw of Sansa, she was escaping from the royal wedding feast where King Joffrey died. She wondered if her hairnet that Sir Dontos made her wear played a role in the death. Dontos assured her it did not. She was then ushered out of the Red Keep by Sir Dontos to a boat on the Blackwater. The boat took her to a ship where Littlefinger awaited her. Littlefinger killed Dontos, explaining that Dontos would have sold Sansa out. He then told her that they were sailing for home. Mackelly, why don't we get the summary of this one?
We shall. And, of course, this summary, much like the last episode's summary, is courtesy of Jenny of Oldstones. So,
she's really pulling her weight.
She really is, yes. Yeah. She's keeping us in line, that's for sure. And as Jenny always does, she titled this summary. And, of course, this was taken right from the mouth of the Lord of Harrenhal. And she calls it the Drear Fort, which is what Petyr Baelish dubs his little abode here.
Well, stop jumping to the punchline. Tell us more.
Sansa, Littlefinger, and company arrive in the Fingers after a rough crossing. Storms delayed their journey and caused Sansa to be seasick, forcing her to stay below deck. Sansa had assumed Littlefinger was taking her home to Winterfell, but is dismayed to learn that he brought them to his childhood home in the Vale.
This turns out to be a forlorn tower keep on a desolate stretch of beach. He tells her that Winterfell is sacked and burned and that she must make a new home with him. Littlefinger informs her that her aunt Lysa is coming and that he and Lysa are to wed.
The household staff is on hand to greet their lord, small though it may be. When alone, Littlefinger informs Sansa she must assume a new identity, since it isn't safe to be Sansa Stark. He tells her she will be Alayne Stone, naming her after his mother. He gives her a cover story to allay suspicion.
Littlefinger speaks of Ned and the Game of Thrones and how to be a player instead of a piece. Sansa brings up Dontos as Joffrey's killer, but Littlefinger says he was not to be trusted. He then calls in one of the staff, Oswell, who's revealed to be a Kettleblack, father of Osmond, Osney and Osfrid. Littlefinger employs them, but they aren't to be trusted either. He gives Sansa time to conclude that Olenna Tyrell was responsible for Joffrey's death.
Gasp.
Olenna didn't want any harm coming to Margaery, so she conspired with Littlefinger to murder Joffrey so that Margaery could marry Tommen instead.
When Lysa arrives 8 days later, she brings a small retinue, including a septon and a singer. She's elated to see Littlefinger, and it's evident she loves him. Lysa tells Littlefinger the Vale Lords are demanding she call her banners and go to war. Several have been trying to wed her, but she only wants Petyr. She insists he marry her immediately, even when he says he wishes to marry her in the Eyrie. Petyr agrees, and they are married that day.
After they are wedded and bedded, the singer, Marillion, makes rather insistent advances towards Sansa, but Lothar Brune is watching out for her on Littlefinger's orders and drives him away. The next morning, Littlefinger and Lysa summon Sansa and inform her that Lysa now knows who she is. They are leaving for the Eyrie that afternoon. Littlefinger leaves so the two can talk. Lysa says Sansa's resemblance to Cat is too obvious, so they will darken her hair.
They awkwardly discuss Sansa's marriage to Tyrion. Lysa laments that she had no choice in her own marriage as well. Petyr had been too lowborn for her father. After she wed Jon Arryn, he'd put Littlefinger in charge of customs in Galltown to please her. Littlefinger increased the income tenfold and then rose higher and higher in other appointments until he became Master of Coin. She's also had 5 miscarriages with Jon Arryn. Only Robert had survived infancy.
Lysa is angry at Cat for bringing Tyrion to the Eyrie and for taking their uncle, Sir Brynden, Blackfish Tully. She wishes she had killed Tyrion when she'd had the chance. The mountain clans are growing bold, but she is sure that Littlefinger will sort them out after she names him Lord Protector of the Vale. She admits she is glad that Joffrey is dead because he had bullied little Robert at court and slapped him once with a wooden sword. Lysa wants Sansa to wed Robert as soon as they get word that Tyrion is dead. She calls Sansa a beggar and insists that she abandons her pride and becomes a gracious and obedient wife.
Sounds like something Lysa would say.
Yeah. Was this a long chapter? Because I read this on my device rather than in the book, and so I didn't have a sort of sense. It felt like a lot happened.
Yes. In my ebook version, it was 17 pages. I think the audiobook was over 50 minutes or so.
Wow,
around 50 minutes.
That's considerable.
So,
okay,
yeah,
good.
It was a longer one.
Yeah.
With a lot going on.
Yeah. So, it's interesting to me that Petyr Baelish sent the ship, which is called the Merlin King, I believe, is that right?
Yep.
To Essos after dropping them off at the Fingers. So he's very worried, obviously, about pursuit. He's trying to throw off anyone who might be pursuing him. But it feels like coming through the storm that they came through, that cost at least 3 sailors their lives, that any pursuit would have lost them completely at that point.
Yes. It could just be that it was a coincidence that the Merlin King was heading to Essos, and this is as far as they could.
So that's
take
just
them.
Its next port of call for whatever reason.
Could
Nothing
be.
to do.
Yeah. He doesn't really specify, but it could be that would explain it.
The only thing about that is if he marries Lysa Arryn, word is going to get out. I mean, she's naming him Lord Protector of the Vale. I mean, it's hard to pretend you were in Essos while that was going on.
Yeah, I don't know that it does. I mean, he's on orders from Tywin to woo and marry Lysa Arryn. So, he's expected to be in the Vale, at least by the Lannisters and King's Landing.
Yeah. So that whole thing is a bit strange, actually, isn't it? Because he has to go there, but pursuit... Nobody knows that Sansa is with him.
Right. That's the key.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But actually, I've got a point later on, which now this conversation is undermined. Because later on, I'm going to make the point, why disguise Sansa Stark? But there's an extremely good reason to disguise Sansa Stark. Because if word gets out that Petyr Baelish has Sansa Stark with him in the Vale...
Dirty hands.
Suddenly,
yes.
His involvement in Joffrey's death becomes very apparent.
Yeah. In this chapter, he says, always keep your hands clean. And that would be... a bit of dirt under his fingernails there.
Yeah.
He told Sansa at the end of last chapter that she was heading home, kind of needlessly tricking her with a technicality. I don't know why he'd bother getting her hopes up. She was pretty well stuck on that ship and pretty happy to leave King's Landing.
True. Compared to killing Sir Dontos directly in front of her, saying we're going to the Vale didn't seem as big a thing.
Small potatoes, right, yeah.
Yes, but then again, at the same time, reassuring her at that moment makes a little bit of sense.
Yeah, I guess so. You're right. At the moment, she might have been upset about Sir Dontos and, Joffrey's death and everything. Maybe it just... But he never... they had a lot of time on that ship, and he could have at some point said, oh, when I said we're going home, I meant my home, not your home. Because... in this chapter, when she realizes, oh, I thought we were going to Winterfell, he says, you thought we were making for Winterfell? It's been sacked and burned, and all those you knew and love are dead. And I was like, whoa, okay.
Yeah.
Simmer down a little bit.
That's the opposite of trying to, the small potatoes thing. That's like bigging up the potatoes, right?
Yes. Just maybe don't word it quite that way.
Yeah.
It's not safe in the north right now. We can't go back. Good enough.
No, we really can't. And if you want, I'll lay out the reasons.
Right. But I don't think you want me to.
The whole thing's pretty rough for Sansa. The crossing itself, I mean, she's filthy and covered in vomit. She's got long hair, right? So probably that. And no handmaiden to hold it back while she pukes.
Right. Maybe they got like a whatever a low-level person on a ship is to do that job.
The whole arrival at the Fingers, because it is the Fingers, that's where they are, yeah?
Yep.
Yeah. Is kind of humanizes Petyr Baelish for me a little bit. We haven't seen a lot of him. If you think how many times he's actually been on screen, it's not very often.
He's talked about a lot, but
he's talked about a lot, exactly.
Yeah.
But his interaction with his old retainers at the castle is very fun. He's funny and kind towards them, and they're very fond of him, obviously.
Yeah, maybe it's one place, these people have known him since he was born. Maybe it's the one place he feels like he can be himself.
Yeah, but I mean, if you're nice with people you've known all your life, you've got it in you to be nice to other people. He's obviously calculating, but he's not without... I mean, it just felt like there's redeeming features here that we'd never seen before or never been hinted at before. Everything we've ever heard about him is his scheming. But he actually... Yes. It seems to me that he might fall in love, or he might be kind to someone just to be kind to someone. And I'd never got that impression of him previously.
No, I mean, even last chapter he talked about basically constantly playing the Game of Thrones. He talks again in this chapter about it. So maybe when he's at King's Landing, that's really all he focuses on. And here, he can just be Petyr Baelish, Lord of the Drearfort.
Okay, I'm going to hold up my hand now, and you describe the fingers.
Yeah, so let's get oriented here. They're in the fingers. And so the fingers are kind of the northeast portion of the Vale.
Right.
And there are 5 peninsulas that poke out into the narrow sea like, well, fingers. So Littlefinger's tower here is on the tip of the smallest finger, which is also the most southern of the fingers. Okay. And so that's how he got his nickname Littlefinger.
Because he's from the littlest finger.
Yes, Edmure Tully dubbed him that because he's from the smallest finger. Probably didn't hurt that Petyr is also rather diminutive in stature, So.
Seems reasonable. So, tell me, Mackelly, how did a boy from the fingers end up as a ward of Hoster Tully?
Well, funny you should ask that question. I was going to just tell you about that.
Good, I'm glad. Because I don't know.
So, Petyr's father and Hoster Tully actually became friends during the War of the Ninepenny Kings. And through that friendship, they arranged Hoster Tully to take Petyr Baelish as his ward at Riverrun.
Have we done background on the Ninepenny Kings?
We've talked about it a little bit. I don't know that I've done a full background. I'm sure I will when the opportunity arises, because background is getting a little tricky sometimes. So. The whole chapter kind of starts off with a lie. Like, the very first bit of dialogue is Littlefinger telling Sansa that don't shed a tear for the dwarf because Tyrion had a wife before her, and when he grew tired or bored of his wife or whatever, he gave her to his guardsmen. So
now, I was going to noodle on this just a little bit, Mackelly.
Noodle away.
We are biased towards our POV characters, all of them,
Sure.
We root
Natural.
for Tyrion. He's a Lannister. We root for Daenerys. She's son of the Mad King Aerys.
We rooted for Theon sometimes.
Well, true.
Yeah, a little bit, maybe.
But generally, we root for our POV characters because they're more alive to us than the non-POV characters.
Right.
But this looks like a lie because we believe Tyrion. But Tyrion is a Lannister and smart and calculating, and maybe his story is the lie, and Petyr Baelish is telling us the truth here.
Could be. He's had internal thoughts to us about Tysha. Unless he's convinced himself that he didn't do such things, it's...
I'm with you. I'm inclined to agree. I mean, we have on some levels an unreliable narrator. Do you put it past George Martin to make the unreliable narrator the POV character? I do not. I put very little past George Martin.
I agree with that.
Ever since the beheading of Ned Stark, to be honest.
That's right. That's where it all began.
Exactly.
I had never thought about the fact that maybe Tyrion... It's never even crossed my mind that maybe Tyrion is unreliable in his narration of that event.
It seems unlikely to me too, and it's not. This thought has not really changed my opinion, but I'm like, we've just heard the story 2 different times. nobody else has told the story, have they? Jaime hasn't told the story?
Jaime's had thoughts about Tyrion loving him for a lie. We assume that has something to do with the Tysha situation, but we don't know.
Which we smelled at the time that seemed like it was backing up Tyrion's version of events, didn't we? But
kind of, yes.
The flip side of that, of course, is maybe the lie is the story.
Yeah.
The story that Tyrion tells. Now, well, I mean, I agree. I think Tyrion's story is true, and I think Littlefinger is trying to build, to erode whatever connection Sansa had formed to Tyrion. And what better way? I mean, that's an awful, awful story.
Yes, unless it's a rumor going around to prevent the realm from hearing how awful the truth is and a bad look for Tywin and the Lannisters, then, like you said, he's straight up lying to erode the relationship, whatever was formed during their short marriage.
Yeah.
So we finally get to see why it is that Littlefinger would want the title of Lord of Harrenhal when it's a title known to be cursed. We knew when Vargo Hoat took the title, he didn't know. He's not from Westeros. He just thought, wow, this is a really big castle. It would be cool to be Lord of Harrenhal. But Petyr Baelish is very aware that the title of Lord of Harrenhal is a rather cursed title. Now we see why he wanted it so bad.
Yes, I'm with you. I know where you're headed. But I will say, he's also a very rational person, Petyr Baelish, it seems to me. So he possibly doesn't believe in curses.
Yes.
So there's the bit of that. But no, do tell, why did he want it so much?
Well, he needed a very lofty title in order to marry a very lofty lady.
You are right, sir. You can't just be the Lord of the smallest finger and expect to marry the Lady of the Vale. Come on.
What did he call himself? Lord of sheep pellets and rocks or something like that.
And not that many sheep, right? It was the head count was 23.
Yes.
Barely a flock.
Lost some.
Actually, I didn't mention this for pedantry, but losing 3 sailors and losing 6 of your 29 sheep, those are big losses for what I'm expecting is... Those are big percentage losses. I don't know how big the crew of the ship was, but to lose 3 sailors in one storm and 6 sheep in recent times feels like, you're getting through that.
Yeah, I agree.
So in the small tower that marks the stronghold of Petyr Baelish's lands, we see the original Baelish sigil, which is a grey stone head with fiery eyes on a light green field. And he tells the story of its history, which is that his great-grandfather was a sellsword from Braavos, and his grandfather took the head of the Titan of Braavos for his sigil, which is kind of a cool sigil.
Yes, it is kind of cool. I think Sansa refers to it as fierce, and Littlefinger says it's too fierce for an amiable man like me. It's this sigil right here that way back in Bran 3 of A Game of Thrones, which is the chapter when he's dreaming that he's falling and the crow is kind of flying beside him and he's seeing all these things all over around the world. I said that there was a theory about one of the mysterious things that Bran sees. So, do you want to read the passage?
Okay. All around his family, Bran sees shadows, dark as ash, with the terrible face of a hound. Armour as golden and beautiful as the sun. Over them all looms a giant armoured in stone, but with only darkness and black blood behind the visor.
So we talked at the time. The dark ash with the terrible face sounds an awful lot like the hound.
Yes.
Or, I mean, terrible face of a hound.
Yes.
It literally says that in there. Sounds an awful lot like the hound. We discussed the armor as it's golden and beautiful as the sun. At the time, it seemed a lot like Jaime Lannister or Tywin Lannister.
Quite.
Wear gold armor. We'll see shortly there's another character who wears gold armor and has to do with the sun.
How exciting.
Yes, has...
But this last one is over them all looms the giant with the stone face.
Yes. So some people, a lot of people, think the giant of stone looming over all is Littlefinger. And it was masked by using the former sigil because that's the former sigil of House Baelish. the current sigil is a mockingbird.
Right.
So
if Bran's dream had been and a mockingbird over everything, and by a mockingbird I mean Petyr, Littlefinger, Baelish,
right.
we'd have figured it out by now.
Yes, there wouldn't have been very much drama or discussion about what or who
much
it might
like
be.
the whole Jon Arryn, the seed is strong, by which I mean.
Yeah. Joffrey's not Robert's son.
It's nothing to do with Sweet Robin. He's definitely mine.
So,
and he's not strong.
No, not at all. I'll just give you some of the reasoning that people think that this giant might be Littlefinger.
Well, because he has been the architect of the downfall of the Starks in many ways.
Yes, yeah. First of all, he talks in this chapter and in previous chapters about playing the Game of Thrones and being a player versus being pieces. And yes, like you said, he's had his hand in everything. He lied about the dagger, which set Catelyn and Tyrion situation in motion and started the war in the Riverlands and pitted House Lannister versus House Stark. He brokered the marriage between Joffrey and Margaery. He, I'll put in quotations, helped Ned find the truth of Jaime and Cersei's incestual relationship. He's the one that set up the arrangement for Ned with the gold cloaks and then turned around and backstabbed Ned with those same gold cloaks. And, he's the one that told Tywin about Sansa and Willis's marriage plan by the Tyrells. And
yes,
he even set up the jousting dwarves to put Joffrey and Tyrion at odds at the wedding. And we learn in this chapter that he's behind the Kettleblacks being introduced to Cersei. So, as you said, he's got his hands in everything. And his original house sigil is the Titan of Braavos, which you might consider to be a giant of stone.
I gotta say, I'm convinced. Which actually, if you think about it, is potentially quite a big spoiler. Because we don't really know. I mean, certainly we know those facts, but there's definitely a side of him which wants to be a protector for Sansa.
Right. Yeah, sure.
But now, knowing all this, I'm like, well, now I don't trust him at all to be a protector for Sansa. I mean, obviously, my thinking he wants to be a protector for Sansa is tempered by the fact I think he wants to be a rapist of Sansa. But,
right.
He has some good motives as well as the dark ones. Maybe that's why he looms over her in a bad way, even though he wants to be her protector, because really he's just got designs on her.
Could be.
There's nothing good in that for her.
Yeah, he's to this point. There's one point where they're sitting there together drinking the wine, and she's watching him watching her over his wine cup, and she can't quite make out what it is in his eyes that he's seeing her with. She thinks maybe amusement, but she's not really sure exactly what it is in his eyes that he's seeing. That she's seeing when he looks at her.
Yeah, and that goes to how he's always been around her, which is strange and unreadable.
Right.
And disconcerting. Whenever she's around him, she's disconcerted by the way he looks at her. But the thing is, I think if it was pure lust, she wouldn't be so disconcerted by it. She would recognize it. She's not a complete innocent.
Right. Yes, there's a lot of mixed everything going on there. I will say, just to wrap up the stone giant thing, there is another strong candidate for the giant, but we'll discuss that candidate when we meet that character.
Interesting. So, Sansa, channeling her aria, takes a new name. So you said it slightly different than I was saying it. I was saying it more like Alayne, but you said Elaine. But of course, because Littlefinger is saying that she's a bastard, she gets the local bastard surname, which is Stone. So she becomes Alayne Stone.
Yeah, so she gets a new name and a new father.
Yeah.
Yeah. And she's not a real big fan of being natural born. The reason that Littlefinger gives for using this backstory of her being his natural born daughter is that it's rude to ask questions about someone's natural-born children.
Yes, yeah. Which is an interesting departure from the TV show, because in the TV show, they claim she's a niece.
Oh, that's right. I read in your comparison with the TV show that you mentioned. I was like, I knew that from somewhere. Oh,
but that to me seems like an important miss there, because that's a very good point. You might ask, oh, who is your father and mother? Oh, presumably it's Littlefinger's brother or sister that you didn't know he had.
Right. I thought you were an only child. Well, you see, the thing is this.
Yeah. I call her niece, but she's a bastard. No questions, please.
No questions. It was kind of part of the spoiler talk that you and Jenny and I had from Arya 12. We wondered if the Hound and Arya kept going to the Vale and met with Lysa and Littlefinger, what would happen and what would Arya's backstory be. And this is the bit that was the spoilery thing. We didn't want to divulge that Littlefinger and Sansa were going to meet up with Lysa in such a fashion.
I tell you what, this whole thing, I'd forgotten that there was a chance of this sort of coming together, but it's quite the feat to have the Sansa and Arya stories being so similar in some ways at this moment in time, in that they're both being protected by an enemy.
Right.
And they're both loose somewhere in the world, and nobody really knows where they are. And for it not to feel same-ish, because neither of us had noticed it until this very second. And also that you could keep the story propelling forward, because it feels to me like if I was writing a story and I got into that situation, that I would be lost in a maze that I was never going to get out of. But I know that their stories are going to propel, and it's impressive to keep those going forward when at this point in time it could go horribly wrong.
Oh, yeah.
For us, the reader, I mean, not for Arya and Sansa. It could go horribly wrong for them, too.
Right, could go horribly wrong for all of us. Yeah. This adds a new wrinkle to the discussion that we had in the spoiler section of that episode is Littlefinger's worried that Varys' birds are going to find out that Sansa's in the Vale. Well, if the Hound had shown up in the Vale with Arya Stark, the Hound is a lot more recognizable than probably most of the people in Westeros. So, do the birds go tell Varys, hey, guess who's in the Vale? The Hound. And guess who he says he's with? Arya Stark. So, then that could get messy for Littlefinger there as well.
Right, yeah.
So, but it didn't happen, so.
Yeah. So, the Kettle Blacks are explained. I mean, this was the Kettle Blacks. Jaime is the one who's been suspicious of them. It's like, where the hell did they come from? I hadn't even heard of them. They never fought in any tourneys. But basically, they're Petyr Baelish's men, and he lured them in. He dangled them in front of Cersei, and made Cersei believe that she had them in her pocket. And he uses this not only to sort of get some influence in Cersei's circles, but also as a demonstration of how Cersei is not a good player of the Game of Thrones. I mean, there's Petyr Baelish, there's Cersei, and then there's Ned Stark way down at the bottom.
Sorry, he's at the bottom.
Head and shoulders below everybody else.
Oh, no.
Oh, come on.
Oh, poor Ned. I mean, first of all, the brilliance of Littlefinger's plan here is he originally brings them to town to be part of Bronn's sellsword army, and then uses them as double agents to put them in front of Cersei. So that they're really, as far as Littlefinger is concerned, they're spying on two groups.
Right.
And of course, it also explains, you missed this discussion last chapter, why it is that Jaime, or anyone, had never heard of Osmond Kettleblack or his brothers before. That was Jaime's thing. Like, how come it is that I've been all around this realm and I've never heard of you before?
Yeah.
Well, now we see, because they were just 3 sheep herders in the Fingers, I guess.
Yeah. He makes an interesting point that Cersei is a good player in the sense that she wants power so badly, but then she has no idea what to do with it and misuses it so badly, whereas he believes himself, if he got that power, he would use it well. What he means by well, it troubles me,
Yes. Yeah, for good or use it well. There's a difference there. He could definitely make an argument that she doesn't necessarily know how to use the power that she gets. Because, we see her making self-serving moves.
Yeah.
And oftentimes, we end up with this Kingsguard realignment where Barristan Selmy gets booted out and Jaime gets promoted to Lord Commander. Osmond Kettleblack gets moved into Jaime's spot. Or no, sorry, the Hound got moved into Jaime's spot. And, that angered Tywin because none of it needed to happen.
Yeah, yeah. But at the same time, I mean, she had sort of unbridled power at that point, but she had to make decisions. Elevating the Hound to the Kingsguard when he is already Joffrey's prime protector doesn't seem that ridiculous. It actually seems like a perfectly logical step.
If there was a spot. Problem is, you basically removed Barristan Selmy, one of the most prized personalities of Westeros, for the Hound, who was already there doing these jobs anyway.
Yeah. But again, I mean, look, everyone's got respect for Barristan Selmy, but the charges she laid at his feet were not incorrect. Yeah. You're not supposed to outlive as many kings as you've outlived as a Kingsguard.
There's that detail. You notice he didn't put that in his white book pages, I don't think. That didn't spell that out.
You and I work with a guy, editor, and the other day I was telling him that I was telling him and my writer that they'd made a mess up of something. And the editor came back to me and said, "Oh, I think that's my fault. I'm really sorry." Now, I'm pretty sure it was my writer who messed up. And so I said to the editor offline, I said, "Look, I think you've just Secret Serviced a bullet for an undeserving president."
I like the analogy there.
Yeah, you like that? Yeah. I don't even remember what we were just talking about that triggered that, but
Barristan Selmy outliving more kings than he probably should have.
Yes, Barristan Selmy just letting them all fly past him. He's leaping out of the way. All right, so so the big news, of course, of this chapter. Well, there's tons of big news. We're going to be here all night.
There really is. Yeah.
So Littlefinger tells Sansa who actually murdered Joffrey, and he says it's Olenna Tyrell. Now, that is someone that we thought might be involved because she did mess with the hairnet, and she has the exact motive that Littlefinger lays out here. We don't believe what he said about Tyrion, but we choose to believe this.
Right.
I'm just saying, you got to be careful with what you believe.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you're right. If he told that lie so easily about Tyrion,
yeah,
he could tell.
It has verisimilitude, right? It has the appearance of truth because we thought it might be her. We're getting confirmation it was her.
Yes.
It feels like it's falling into place.
This reminds me of something that you said during our 50th episode extravaganza that we did when Molly was asking us questions. You said something along the lines of that we carefully examine this story to such a level that we can spoil things without directly doing so.
Right.
And in the case here, if you were just reading through that chapter, the Purple Wedding chapter, you'd read over Olenna saying your hairnet was crooked and straightening it, and just glossed over it and moved on. But we brought it up, we put a spotlight on it, we examined it. We did throw in other suspects to make it less obvious, but that was such a small detail that, the average reader might just, I didn't even notice that happened.
The truth of the matter is, though, I still don't feel this is settled law, because this is Petyr Baelish. And so I believe it right now, but you know what? If in 2 books' time we hear a different story of what happened at the Purple Wedding, I'm willing to believe that. I'm willing to reopen the case.
Oh, yeah. The rest of their behavior doesn't sync up because Olenna wanted to take Sansa to Highgarden and marry her off to Willis. So if she and Littlefinger were working together, on the murder part, they certainly weren't working together on the Sansa escaping plan because Olenna didn't want Sansa to escape. At least that's the version we got from Olenna. She wanted Sansa to go to Highgarden, and Littlefinger instead went another route and got Sansa out of there. So,
do you think if that plan had come to some kind of fruition, well, they wouldn't have had to whisk her away from the wedding, would they? Because she wouldn't have been Tyrion's wife.
Right. She just would have been there. Yeah.
Yeah, she would have just been one of the many witnesses. Right. It's only because she was Tyrion's wife that they had to get her out at that moment.
And it's Littlefinger who's the one that blew up the Willis Sansa betrothal plan.
Yeah.
So if they were working together on the hairnet and the murder, it doesn't seem like they were in sync with what happened after the fact.
Yeah. Good call.
The final thing I wanted to add about the Kettleblacks is last Sansa chapter. You remember when she was on the boat with Dantos and Oswell, she kept looking at Oswell and thinking, there's something really familiar about that guy's face, but I just can't remember what it was, or what. I just can't figure out what it is. Well, now we discover what it is the fact that she was seeing the Kettleblack look in that man's face.
Oh, yeah.
And I said at the time, there were some clues for really astute observers, and the clues were the hooked nose. Every single time a Kettleblack is mentioned, the physical description is the hook, the kind of larger hooked nose, and his name begins with an O. And all the Kettleblacks' names, Osmond, Osney, Osfrid, Oswell, they all begin with those. So anyway, I just wanted to tie that loose end up from last Sansa chapter.
Yep. So Olenna was always suspicious about Joffrey's true nature. She grilled Sansa about it, remember? And then Littlefinger reveals that he intentionally told Olenna that Joffrey was great, whilst secretly feeding her the truth through third parties that he was a monster.
Yes. So keeping those hands clean.
Exactly. Keep those hands clean. You're absolutely right. But then he's assuming, I mean, I assume that this is an assumption that he's making, that Olenna, well, I don't know. When did they talk? I mean, it feels like they talked way back when Renly was still alive, right? That's the only opportunity.
Petyr Baelish and Olenna talked when Littlefinger went to go put together the alliance and the betrothal of Joffrey and Marjorie.
Marjorie, yeah. So that's after Renly's death?
Yes, after Renly's death.
Okay, I see, yeah. So, but Olenna can still make Marjorie queen, because just like Melisandre said, Joffrey's death doesn't end the Lannister line. Tommen is next in line to be crowned, and he needs a wife. In about 6 years, anyway.
Yeah. I don't know that they'll wait quite that long, but no. Yes, theoretically, it should be about 6 years or so.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. They had an heir. They didn't need Joffrey. They had a much less evil-seeming heir. So, and I wonder, Olenna was getting all these third-party things, all this third-party info about what a terrible person Joffrey is. But I wonder if it was Sansa's first-person account of Joffrey's behavior that put the final nail in the coffin for her to agree to this murdering him plot.
Yeah. Well, I mean, certainly as a human, she would have a lot of sympathy for Sansa. And less for Joffrey at that point.
Right.
So, Littlefinger, he's not hesitant to big up his own achievements.
No, he's not.
One of the ones he points to is getting Loras in the Kingsguard, and he basically says that he manipulated Mace Tyrell into wanting that so subtly that Mace Tyrell thinks it was his own idea. But honestly, the way Mace Tyrell is portrayed, it feels like he's pretty suggestible, so it's not that hard. But one of the things that it did do was relieve him of the need to find a bride for his third son, which is always a little bit tricky. And Littlefinger says more so with Loras, which is one additional indication that Loras might be gay. And,
the characters
and have
often
a thing
make...
for Renly.
Right, yeah, exactly. The characters often make these vague references, like Jaime saying he's going to stick the sword up Loras where even Renly couldn't find it.
Yeah.
Make these kind of vague references, but nobody ever outright acknowledges the fact. So I guess it's just a sign of the times, that...
Although, if you want a smoking, nay, flaming gun, the way Loras reacts... Sorry. The way Loras reacts to Brienne's arrival is pretty...
Right.
Pretty self-incriminating. Sure, he's got professional pride that he, as member of the Rainbow Guard, allowed Renly to die, but his harbouring that grudge suggests more than just, I wish you hadn't done that.
Sure, yeah.
So, news that Lysa and Littlefinger are to be married has to be something of a relief to Sansa, who has obviously is concerned about what Baelish's designs towards her are. But, well, what are his designs towards Sansa? I mean, that's the thing. If he's marrying Lysa, marriage doesn't mean everything in this realm. Plenty of people cheat on their wives, but to cheat on your wife with your wife's own niece, who's pretending to be your own bastard daughter, feels even for this a little too much.
Right. Yeah. It's bordering Jaime and Cersei having sex over their dead son's body. It's whole
and
other
also
level of creepy.
asking, presumably while you're making love to Sansa, asking her to pretend to be her mother would just really that'd be the cherry on top right there.
That is, yes. There's even more layers here.
So Lysa seems pretty much mad to me. I mean, like quite crazy.
Yeah. Well, first of all, they kind of commiserate. When the two of them get together at the end of the chapter, it's kind of the last conversation of the chapter, is Lysa and Sansa discussing. And kind of one of the first things they do is Lysa commiserates with Sansa over the fact that Sansa was forced into marrying Tyrion Lannister against her wishes, just as Lysa was forced to marry Jon Arryn against her own wishes. And so I went and looked it up. I think we've probably discussed this ages ago, but I had forgotten what the gap exactly was. But at the time of their marriage, Jon Arryn was somewhere in his mid-60s when they got wed, when they were wed. Lysa was somewhere around 15.
Wow.
So it's a significant gap. So yeah, they were commiserating about Tyrion being a member of the enemy family, him being unattractive and known to frequent prostitutes, whereas Jon Arryn was old and had bad breath. Those were the kind of the characteristics they were kind of griping over.
To be honest, I think Sansa got it worse. I mean, you could buy the man a toothbrush and outlive him.
Though, some of it, I wonder a little bit about Lysa's mental state and the fact that she was forced to marry this, and this time, in this world, a quite elderly man when she was a teenager. If that might have had some impact on her mental health.
For sure, yeah. Particularly if, as you've speculated earlier, or we now know for a fact, she had recently been forced to unwillingly to abort a child.
Right.
And then be shipped off to marry someone you don't love. That's
so
a very vulnerable state to be in.
Yeah. And like you said, her mental instability does remain front and present again in this chapter. She oscillates between compassion and accusation with Sansa.
Yeah, when she's compassionate towards Sansa, she seems like quite a nice aunt, but then she just goes through these sudden changes of attitude where she's sort
very
of
manic
at her, and
it's grabs her arm and says, "Tell me, are you with child? I'll know if you're lying."
Yeah,
and
when Petyr Baelish makes the very reasonable point that the Lord of Harrenhal should marry the Lady of the Vale in the Eyrie in front of all of the lords, she is like, "No, I brought a septon. We're doing it here in the sheepdung."
here and now, between the sheep dung and the rocks.
Right, and he pushes, but she's got that look in her eye, and he yields pretty smartly before.
Right. Yes.
But he's right. It's important to his claim that everyone knows it happened. So it's unfortunate for him.
He doesn't make that. He doesn't specify that, but it's pretty clear that's what he's thinking when he says it's kind of important that we do it at the Vale in front of your court. You also see why in this conversation, you see why she's so overprotective with little Robert, because she tells Sansa she's lost 5 children in infancy, which is just awful. That would mess with any person's mental stability.
Let's give Lysa a break here. She's had a rough go of it, but times are hard for everyone.
Right. Oh, and I will say about the bad breath thing, Jon Arryn having bad breath. She mentions that Littlefinger has good breath. And it's kind of a known thing that he always chews mint leaves. So I guess...
Oh, there you go.
Maybe he saw... Well, no, he liked chewing mint leaves ever since he was a kid, I believe. That was something that came up a long time ago. Anyway, just thought I'd throw that in there.
The other person that Lysa brings with her for the wedding is the singer Marillion, who's an old friend of ours. He was the singer who accompanied Catelyn, Tyrion, and Bronn up the mountains, right?
Right, yes.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
His behaviour towards Sansa is an absolute disgrace, and it is to Petyr Baelish's
agreed.
credit that he had Lothar Brune watch over her. Can I just mention that right at the start of this chapter, she says that Sir Lothar Brune, as he is now, having been knighted after his exploits on the Blackwater, is not a true knight because he wears scruffy brown trousers. Will this child not learn what makes a true knight?
Slow on the uptake with that one, I guess.
Yeah, every true knight she's ever known has been a monster.
Right.
The people who've had the name who don't fit the bill are the ones who are chivalrous and kind towards her.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
or
true.
even in this case of the Hound, they don't even have the title.
Right. Yeah. The Hound, his relationship with her is so complicated, but he saved her. He saved her life.
Right.
So
and Lothar Brune did it here without any additional creepiness, so that's good.
Right. Yes. He protected her and left her alone.
And it was at Petyr Baelish's request. So credit to Petyr for that. He's protecting her. Of course, one always worries about his motives. Is he protecting her for her, or is he protecting her so that she's unspoiled when he gets to her?
Yeah.
Sorry to bring it down. So Lysa is hellbent on keeping the Vale out of the war, as we've known all along. But the Knights of the Vale apparently are beginning to disagree with her, or have always been disagreeing with her. Lysa thinks that Petyr will be the fix to all this. He'll get them in line. I can't imagine he's going to want to go and join in the war, but there isn't much of a war going on, really. I mean,
right.
So maybe it's an easy fix. It's over, guys.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. At this point, if the Knights of the Vale want to join the war, it must be to join against the Lannisters. Because, like you said, it's nearly over. Why else would you want to join the war at this point than if you want to fight the Lannisters?
Right, exactly.
And she makes the argument that the Vale is special because it's so protected from outside forces, and she's absolutely right. Unlike, the North is protected by Moat Cailin, but there's lots of exposed shoreline there.
Right.
And, it's so cold, so the harvest is more limited, and the Vale is like a comfy cocoon with fertile farmlands, very self-sustaining, like the complete opposite of the Riverlands, which are exposed in all directions by every other realm around them. So... Yeah, she's right. They could stay out of this war and just be isolated, self-sufficient, but apparently her lords are antsy to get in the fight.
So the last thing that happens is that she decides that Sansa is going to marry Robert Arryn. Can't imagine that the prospect of marrying your own first cousin is that appealing to Sansa, especially given what she knows of the spawn of incest from her time with Joffrey.
Right. There's certainly precedent. Tywin Lannister married his first cousin, Joanna. Even her grandfather, Sansa's grandfather, Rickard Stark, married Lysa Stark.
Interjection on Tywin. How did his kids work out? Not perfect either.
Yes, fair point. she thinks that nobody is ever going to marry her for love, just for her claim. And quite honestly, when she's Sansa Stark, that's probably true. Maybe Alayne Stone, that will be different for, but she's the firstborn daughter of Ned and Catelyn, and thought to be the only living Stark heir. So it's kind of unlikely she's going to get to marry just for love.
Yep. If her first cousin was someone other than Robert Arryn, she might turn a blind eye, but he is not great.
Yeah.
Not a catch.
He's little, maybe, Dr. Honda thought Joffrey could still be saved.
Good point.
Could have time.
The love of a good woman. That's all he needs.
Yeah, that's what he needs.
So now a brief interjection while we do spoilers, just for our sustainers. Become a sustainer and you get to hear what we say next.
That's right. And if you're a sustainer who has not finished the story yet and you don't want to hear the spoilers, just skip ahead to background, because this is the last segment of our discussion.
Good call. All right. Do you have some background for us?
I have some background. So Littlefinger shows Sansa a rock with a 7-sided star carved into it and says the carving dates back to the arrival of the Andal invaders. Of course, we all know about how the Andals came from Essos and conquered the first men thousands of years ago, bringing with them the faith of the Seven. What you might not know is that when the Andals first arrived in Westeros, they landed right here in the Fingers, which makes you kind of wonder why they decided to stay in Westeros, considering the description we've gotten about the Fingers so far. But Anyway, like most of Westeros, prior to the Andals' arrival, the Vale was ruled by petty kings of the First Men. 2 of such kings were Tywin Shell and Jon Brightstone, both who claimed to be King of the Fingers. Both Tywin and Jon had the same idea regarding how to defeat the other. They each hired an Andal warlord to sail to the Fingers and help crush their rival. Unfortunately for them, within a year the Andals had turned on the kings and killed them both. Tywin Shell was roasted alive inside his wooden hall, Jon Brightstone was tortured and beheaded, and an Andal knight named Corwin Corbray took Tywin's wife as a bedwarmer and married Jon's daughter. Corbray then proclaimed himself Lord of the Five Fingers.
Beautiful. Thank you very much.
So he got a 5-finger discount on
I
his...
like it. Comparison with the television show, the major discussion points of this chapter are captured, but some of the settings are altered. Sansa and Petyr discuss the poisoning on board the ship, the conversation, which they may have done in the book too, because she was talking about some of that conversation as a past tense thing. So that may have happened on the boat, but we didn't see it happen on the boat in the book, if you see what I'm saying.
Sure.
She recounts, when she lands at the thing, she recounts some of their previous conversations. That's what I'm saying. So,
okay.
The conversation is very similar to the book. Dantas couldn't be trusted. Sansa was a participant, and Petyr Baelish's loyalties to the Lannisters didn't extend to Joffrey. Next, they go to the Eyrie. So Lysa doesn't come to them. They go to the Eyrie. She's given the name Alayne. Oh, and by the way, this is an interesting point. How do you get to the Eyrie? Because in the TV show, they come through the bloody gate.
Oh.
But it seems to me that if you come by boat, you wouldn't go through unless you intentionally go to a difficult place to park the boat.
Right.
And come that way.
I don't think you have to go through the bloody gate if you are already inside the Vale.
Exactly.
Which the figures are.
Yeah. Well, anyway, they go via the bloody gate to the Eyrie. She's given the name Alayne, but and is told to be a niece. That story, of course, wouldn't fool Lysa, because she would know whether or not Petyr had siblings. Wouldn't fool anyone, really. But
right.
Lysa immediately reveals that she knows who Sansa is. As in the book, Lysa demands and gets a rapid wedding, but so nobody in attendance, but in the Eyrie at least.
Okay.
The screaming of sexual delight is kept, but Sansa is at least in a slightly larger place than the little tower at the Littlefinger.
Right.
So she's able
she
to
can hide from it a little better.
Pillow over her ears, yes. Next day, Lysa confronts Sansa about her relationship with Petyr. She confirms her virginity, and this reassures her aunt, who then says that she can marry Robert, as in the book.
Okay.
So all of that ties up.
Is Marillion in the TV show?
No.
Okay.
No, I didn't see him anyway. I mean, I had to bounce through a couple of episodes to find all this, but no, I didn't see him.
All right.
Pedantry, I didn't get any pedantry. Did you have anything?
I didn't either. And this isn't pedantry. I just don't quite know how it works, how homing birds work. But Littlefinger tells Sansa that he's the one that told Oswell to get his 3 boys to King's Landing to be part of Bronn's sellsword army.
Right.
But if Littlefinger is in King's Landing, even if Oswell's in King's Landing, and he literally tells Oswell this, how do you get a message to that little tower? They couldn't have a rookery nearby, you wouldn't think. Maybe they do. Maybe there's like a post office, like a generic rookery where birds come and go. I just wondered, how would they get that message? Not calling it pedantry necessarily. I'm just not quite sure how that works.
Yep. That kind of pedantry was worse in the TV show because it was often like people had instant knowledge of things that happened 1,000 leagues away. But yeah, that's a reasonable point. All right, news and notes.
Well, Lena Headey of Cersei Lannister fame stars in a new TV show on MGM Plus that's set to be rolled out soon. The show is called Beacon 23, and it's a sci-fi thriller based on the 5-book series from author Hugh Howey. Headey plays the role of Aster and stars opposite Stephen James, who plays Hallan, Halan, Hallan. The series premiere debuts on November 12th. I believe it's a globally released on that day, something around there. So if you're interested in seeing what,
sci-fi.
I wasn't familiar.
Can't be.
Were you familiar? Are you familiar with Hugh Howey or the?
No, that name doesn't mean anything to me. But I will. I'll give it a look if I can.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Lena Headey, so I'll give it a shot.
A huge thank you to Jay, just the letter J, who bought us 20 cups of Arbor Gold on the Buy Me a Coffee site and included a very nice message with their donation. I love listening to you guys. I'm very glad to see you still making new episodes. Occasionally you mention promise that after A Song of Ice and Fire you might, for sure will, do a new book. I'd read whatever your podcast was on. Great work. Thanks much. So yeah, that's extremely kind and we're very grateful for your donation, Jay.
Yes, thank you so very much. That's fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah. All right, let's conclude this one. Sansa is safe-ish.
Safe-ish.
Petyr Baelish is not the kind of guy to break a vow, so he's tied up with his new wife Lysa, and we'll leave Sansa. Why do you laugh when I say these things candidly? Honestly.
She's safer than she was in King's Landing.
I'll
say that.
Yes.
And I felt like the chapter resolved better than at least I had hoped. Lysa seems willing to take Sansa in. She said, "I'd never turn Cat's daughter away," even if she did it in kind of an odd Lysa sort of way, grabbing her wrist and asking her if she's pregnant, insisting she marry her cousin, and making everything all about herself.
Yeah.
But it does look like Sansa's found a new family member to connect with, and that feels positive, especially compared to what she had just come from.
Yeah. So Lysa towards Sansa, mean-spirited, but she doesn't seem to want to actively harm her, unless you include marrying her off to Robert, which might be considered harmful.
Right. Yeah, I feel like Lysa might be the mother-in-law from hell.
Yeah,
if that marriage goes through.
That's true.
But when you're dealing with Sansa, this is her 4th betrothal, right? 1 marriage, 4 betrothals.
Really?
We got Joffrey? Willis, Tyrion, and now Robert. So she's just collecting betrothals. Wow. So
she'll have more betrothals than years if she keeps going this way. So how will Petyr Baelish use his new power? He brags that he would use power well if he had it. Well, he's going to have quite a lot of power here as Lord of Harrenhal and Protector of the Vale. The Vale's very strong, but can this be the limit of his ambitions? Feels like it wouldn't be enough to me. You would be very happy as Lord of the Vale. I know that.
I would. I'd be content just being Lord of the Vale. Exactly. I don't need to go any higher than that, thank you. But he's supposed to bring the Vale into the war for the Lannisters.
Yeah.
But will he bother doing that, or is he just going to go off do whatever he's going to do now.
And if he doesn't, will Tywin care? I mean, as long as he keeps them out of the war, it changes nothing. The Lannisters are barely fighting anyone anymore.
Right, yeah. Yeah, but, how will the other Vale Lords take to Petyr Littlefinger Baelish now being Lord Protector of the Vale?
That's interesting. I mean, he's been there for a while, right? I mean, he came back to rescue Sansa, but he'd been there working his claim. So
maybe we don't know what he's been up to.
Yeah, maybe he'd done some groundwork towards that. But yeah, his insistence on wanting to get married in the Eyrie suggested to me that he was worried about that he thought his claim might be just a little bit fragile.
Agreed. Yeah. I just wondered, many of these lords are tired of sitting idle. They wanted to go off to war, and now she marries Littlefinger and makes him Lord Protector of the Vale. That seems like that could
and
blow
particularly
up in their
if
face.
He does follow up on what Tywin told him to do, which is to say, all right, guys, I know you want to get into this war. Here's the deal. We're going in, but not fighting for the side you wanted to fight for.
Right. Yeah, we're fighting for the Lannisters.
Yeah. Will the Alayne cover story keep Sansa safe? Feels like Varys might see through that.
Yeah, he seems to know all kinds of things he shouldn't know. So
yeah.
I guess if they can stick to it, maybe for a while it'll work.
I think Varys might care for Sansa Stark, but news that Littlefinger Baelish brought her to the Vale would be too tempting for Varys to not share that with the Lannisters.
He would just be like, I know something.
Exactly.
I gotta tell someone this.
Oh, yeah. Who can I tell who would then kill Petyr Baelish? Oh, everybody.
That's right.
Who have we got next time?
Next, we're heading north to the Wall. We're going to catch up with Jon. The fighting continues against the wildlings. Resources grow short, but help arrives. Or does it?
Ooh. Well, there's 4 ways that you can help us. You could leave us a positive review. Those are always the best way to aid us. You could buy merchandise at ghostsofharrenhal.threadless.com. You could buy us a cup or even 20 of Arbor Gold at buymeacoffee.com/ghostharrenhal. Become a sustainer at the Lord Paramount or Knight of the Realm level, and you can hear the salacious things from my trip to England.
That's right. And you can hear the spoiler stuff that we've been throwing in.
Stuff, exactly. Make a donation at our website, ghostsofharrenhal.buzzsprout.com. That's also easy.
And if you're looking for more ways to interact with us, keep up on the latest Ghosts of Harrenhal news and developments, well, you can check us out on our social media accounts. You can follow us on Twitter at Ghost Harrenhal. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Discord, and YouTube.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.